Okay, so let's get straight into the quit morning module. So this is pretty much how Paula and I envisage most of the people, and when I say most of the people are kind of struggling with weight or food and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this was 100% how I felt when I was struggling with food, and I know Paula's cellar. If you see the picture on the screen there, was even darker, even damper, even like almost like a torture chamber sometimes. And we really see this quit morning module as you stepping out of the cold, dark, damp, miserable, tortuous cellar. Okay, this is kind of how we see it. When we move on to our next module, that's very much about, you're out of the cellar and now you're stepping into the sun-drenched patio, right? So, that's kind of where we want to get you. So we want to get you out of this miserable self-loathing rut that you may find yourself in, or you certainly may be bullying yourself for the words that you're saying and the way that you think about your own progress. You might not trust yourself around food. You might feel powerless over food and your food choices and all this kind of stuff, and you might feel sort of powerless to the events and things that happen around you, which is perfectly normal. Like I said, this is exactly where we were. So this module is very much about being able to break away from this or start to move away. And people sort of say, well, is that possible? Well, the thing is, science tells us that there are over 2 million bits of information at any one time that we are receiving through our sight, our sound, our feeling, our taste, and our smell. And yet we kind of focus on the negatives. We miss the positives. But and what we do is we create a history. We create like a history of negatives, of letting ourselves down, of failing, and all this kind of stuff. And it can be really demoralizing and really really sad, and can be really depressing, and we want to kind of change that. Now, the first thing I've got to say, I've got a little bit of an onion alert here. Now, what I mean by this onion alert is that this is not just like, it's not like a one-off thing. You don't just wake up and go, oh, you know what, yeah, I'm going to be positive for the next 30 minutes, right, done. This has got many, many, many layers to this, okay? This is a thing that you're going to constantly have to practice. And, to tell you a little bit of a story, yesterday, Paula's been pretty stressed with stuff at camp at the minute. Things are really getting on top of her a little bit. And to be honest, we took my son Danny to Wales to see his mate, and on the way back, it was very negative. Like our conversation was very negative. It became very draining, and I became very, very drained. And I was like, I've got to stop this. So we basically agreed to stop talking to each other as we were driving along in the car, because I needed enough time to get to energize. And for me, I energize by being alone, by being able to think about the positives in my life and all this kind of stuff. And like quite often I'll just head off into the countryside and go for a little jog or whatever, go to the gym, and that energizes me, being alone. And because I'm very much what do they call it, when an introvert, an introvert. That's how I recharge. Other people might be an extrovert, where they need to be around people. They might need to go to a coffee shop or whatever. But for me, that's how I do it. And as I was driving along, we kind of forced a few words to each other, but we both kind of agreed, even if it wasn't a verbal agreement, just to give each other a bit of time and a bit of space to recharge after being pretty drained. And in the past, I know what would have happened. I would have forced an argument. We'd have bloody barely spoke to each other all day, and we'd have gone through the whole day pretty negative. And how does this relate to food? Well, when you're having a negative day, your default setting quite often is to turn to food for a little bit of a break from that negativity. You turn to food to help pick you up, and albeit it might only be for a few seconds, but food becomes the default answer for all this stuff. So all I did when I was driving along was I just really become aware of the great things in my life. One thing that I know, Paul always says to me, the minute I start talking about my old dog Oppo, right, who was just an absolute, he was an English Bull Terrier. And I used to call him an English Bull Terrorizer, because he was an absolute nightmare. He chewed up my dashboard in my camper van. He was just an absolute nightmare. But whenever I talk to him, like I am now, I become incredibly animated, charged with energy, because it just fills my life with joy, and he recharges me. So I start to think about Oppo, Paula, who always charges me, my two lads, which always where I live next to the river, campers, the way that we can help people change their lives, all these really good positive things. And you know what? It didn't happen instantly, but within the space of 5 or 10 minutes, I was starting to feel better. I was starting to feel like I was charged again, And then after, another 10 minutes, Paula and I cracked on, and we kind of made a non-verbal agreement to not to be so negative for the rest of the day and to make the most of our time on our own. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's all too easy to let life happen to you and to let it knock you on your ass for you to be negative. And then, of course, you've got an excuse to then go and eat shit. When I say shit, I'm getting a bit carried away, but crap food. You then go and eat rubbish food, or you go and binge, or you need to go and have a few drinks or a glass of wine just to help you and all this kind of stuff. But when you truly control what you're thinking and what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, this gives you real power. You almost become enlightened by your ability to offset the negativities in your life. You can smell it out, you can spot it a mile away, and you can do something about it. But like I said, there's many, many layers to it. For today, yesterday it was Paul that drained me. Today, there might be other stuff going, like the weather might be crap, or, the gym might be shut, or, I might just have a chemical imbalance in my head that makes me feel a little bit depressed. And all these things are going to make you negative. You're going to look for the negatives. So how do you know if this is kind of you? Well, quite often we see people come to camp and they've very much got a victim mentality. And this is not a case of, just slag off these bloody mood hoovers and all this, because I know shit happens in life. I know it does. Paula and I have both had our fair share of crap to deal with, as have you, and I'm not, all I'm saying is that, we are powerful enough to choose whether we see ourselves as a victim, or whether we do something about it and reframe it into a positive sense. The way that we describe it is that it's like, imagine somebody slips into a coma, and when they come out of the coma, they've got a choice. They can have a really be bitter about the medical world, and how the doctors have let them down, and how it wasn't their fault that they became ill, and it wasn't their fault they had a car accident or something like that. Or other people reframe it and go on a campaign to change driving laws or food standards or the way that medicine is delivered, and do something positive about it. We've got a choice as to what we do with it. And, our brain, just like money, just like a hammer, just like a sword, just like a spanner, is a tool for us to use, But quite often, left to its own devices, it's almost like we're trying to batter in a screw with a hammer, or we're trying to saw wood with a bloody chisel. We're just the wrong, using a very powerful tool in the wrong way. And this is very much like, this victim mentality. And you can hear it. The way you identify if somebody's victim mentality is you listen to what they say, and they'll say things like, it wasn't my fault, I had no choice, I had to, I was forced to, because of this, and we're going to go through some of these signal words in a bit when we look at the worksheet. But, this victim mentality is when people first come to the residential bootcamp course, it's very much about picking away at this, because if you believed what they were kind of telling you, you'd think that there was this massive conspiracy, this global conspiracy to force these people down and to keep these people down, and maybe you feel like that right now. All I'm saying is that isn't the case. It feels like that because sometimes, just when you think you're getting on top of stuff, life hits you again with something else, and this is the different layers of the onion again. So the first thing is we need to be looking out for this victim mentality. Is that what you've got? I'm going to tell a little story about my dad who actually went into a coma. He had he was given the wrong medication. He lived out in Switzerland, given the wrong medication in Switzerland, and it more or less just wiped out his immune system overnight. and he carries a lot of bitterness about it. The doctors, if they'd have done their job right, if he hadn't been in Switzerland and all this kind of stuff, but ultimately it's happened now. There was loads of ways he could have prevented it from happening, but that is like, what if, and it's done and dusted now. All he can do is concentrate on how he is right now and the future, and how he can flip it. Because actually, what happened when he came out the coma was because his liver was absolutely stripped of all its ability to process toxins and stuff. He could no longer drink. Now my dad misses that because he loved to have a beer, but it's made him healthier. It'll make him healthier because he's no longer drinking alcohol. So there are positives there. But he carries this sort of victim, poor me, all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't empower you. The next thing then, we are, as humans, inherently fear-based animals. We are petrified of everything, and for good reason. Because when we evolved, we were pretty crap at everything. We've not got any armour, we haven't got any sharp teeth, we haven't got sharp nails, we haven't got any camouflage. Our genitals are outside of our body and are therefore vulnerable. We're not particularly good. We're not fast, we're not particularly strong, we're not great climbers, all these things. In fact, the only thing we did have was our brain, and our brain became very, very fear-based. We survived, we climbed to the top of the food chain because we were scared of everything. We were scared of every animal, and we brought that with us into modern day life. Even though we're top of the food chain, apex predators, rule the world, we are still petrified, and we really search out fear. We really search out the negative. It kept us alive, The problem is we now use it as almost entertainment. There is very little positive stories in the newspapers and in the news, and it's negative. And we zone right into it. Look at the soap operas. What are the best stories? The best stories in the soap operas are the real negative ones, where people are gossiping and bitching and all this kind of stuff. And this is because, we have this inherent natural desire, or not really a desire, but a tendency to look for the negatives, to find the negatives, and then to concentrate on the negatives. But I ask you this, if you're receiving 2 million bits of information at any one time, 2 million, I mean, think about that as a number. You're trying to tell me none of those things are positive? You're trying to tell me there's no positives in there at all? Quite often when we get into this rut and it's like, we're doomed. We get into this doomed mentality, and we find it really hard, to find these negatives, but they're there. And the point of this module, this quit moaning module, is to quit moaning long enough to start to see it. Quit moaning long enough to learn to recognise what the positives are. Because they are always there. There's an amazing book that I spoke about before in other lessons called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who probably underwent the greatest bit of human desperation that we could ever imagine. He was a Jew in the Nazi prisoner of war camps, and I mean, it was a case of, you've got to make yourself look fitter than the person next to you, because the person who looks the weakest is going to get killed. A horrific death in the freezing cold. Every day they was put to work, walking through the snow and ice with no shoes. They weren't given any shoes to go and dig some, pit and all this kind of stuff. And he refused to hand over his mind. He constantly looked for the positives in what he was doing, and his big thing was he would think about his wife. Unbeknown to him, his wife had already been killed by the Nazis, but that's what he held on to, and he looked for all the positives in everything that he did. He's a very smart man, and it's a great book. So what I'm saying with this is, it's not your fault. It's not your fault, and left to its own devices, this is the brain. This is how the brain wants to work. We're going to level up. We're going to go up to the next level in the way that we use our mind as a tool. Okay, so we're going to change that. Okay, so I put this little slide in, the guy pointing. This is quite often what we do. And I've put the term back at you, because quite often, we do a lot of comparison. Even when we're feeling down, we tend to point the finger at other things and compare other things and pretty much slag them off, if I'm honest. You know, we gossip, you know, we find the faults in other people. My point is, whenever you're pointing at somebody and you've got one finger pointing at someone else, there's always three fingers pointing back at you. And what I want you to use that for is like a metaphor for, what am I not learning? What am I not seeing? Am I picking out these faults in other people and other things because they are faults that I know I have myself and I don't like it? You know, am I distracting myself from what I should be dealing with? Am I deflecting stuff? You know, and you know, Paula and I are very much, you know, we kind of, we're constantly thinking, well, hang on a minute, if I'm caught up on this, what am I missing? You know, what other parts of this 2 million bits of information am I kind of not seeing? You know, and everything is usually about, well, you failed to learn something, or, you know, it's more about you than it's about the other person. Okay, so, you know, remember that, and every time you find yourself, you catch yourself gossiping, being negative, dragging other people down, you know, think about yourself a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to end this little video there before we go on to the next module. This is the first part, a little bit longer than I would normally do, but this is something that we're incredibly passionate about, and because we know it's the fulcrum of everything that we do on this program. You know, it's about this, about looking at where we're driving this energy, we're using our vital energy in a negative manner, aiming at the negative stuff, and sometimes all we need is a little shift, and there's just so much positive stuff. All right, and it really is about finding that. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video.